Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGPrime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FoulLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FoulLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer patrons Shukong Fu, Vite Ramen, and Maxime Van He. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey the Rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you the second of our What Can Harvesting Season Do For You feature matches here. But before we get into that, just a reminder that New World Emerges is finally coming out, just a couple weeks. Pre-releases this weekend and set releases next week, so be sure to pick up your product if you haven't already. And also be sure to sign up for Foul Fest, coming in November 5th and 6th in the Radisson Hotel. There's a link to the Facebook group that has all of the relevant information down below, as well as the way to sign up. It is absolutely going to be huge. We have tons of prizing, well worth your entry promos, as well as just amazing prizes all the way down through top 64, and giveaways and exclusives and all kinds of fun stuff. So be sure to check that out. So, we're playing two older rulers. We're playing Brunhild from the Rune Ruler era, and Tyler Tompkins is playing Faerur from back in the Rhea Cluster era. Tyler took Faerur to a top 8 finish at the Atlanta GP, and Brunhild, this list was developed by Brednon over on Discord. He calls it Bad at Math Brunhild. We're calling it Catapult Brunhild for the sake of today. Trying to make big numbers happen with harvesting season, with all the cards, to be able to send stuff to the graveyard that actually goes to the RFG and modifies counts, and then throw big cards at people with Artillerist. It's a pretty fun list. Let's go ahead and see what happens. Tyler's list is very clearly designed to help ramp up, and is a kind of a take on Elf Ball, using some of the really cool ideas to support a wide board pushing in for big damage that have come out over the past couple years. So let's go ahead and jump into it. There's a little bit of advantage Tyler has because he has access to Faerur, Spell, and Lorite more than we do. We are playing Moonshades in the Catapult list, so we can protect it a little bit, but it's not as consistent because, again, we're looking for mainly black-white stones, like that Ancient Magic Stone coming in here, Gilhalamat Stone, paying 3 so we can play Harvesting Season and seeing what we can send in. Tyler's sitting on the ability to be able to untap a stone thanks to those Spirit Color Elves, and seeing how much of a modified cost we have right now. Ultimately, just a modified cost of +4 to our light cards, so Artillerist throwing a 1-drop becomes a 5-drop, 1,000 damage, so on and so forth. But it does also hit a Pandora to the graveyard, which is a big part of Brunhild we've seen before. Thanks to the beauty that is Einherjar summon, we can go ahead and turbo out that Pandora to unseal our light cards. This is huge because it gives us the ability to access the seal ability of number 13, which means it is immediately free as soon as that Brunhild hits that Pandora hits the field, which can be very helpful for protecting the combo. So out comes Pandora, and at that point in time, we're going to pass the turn. Mainly because you see we have that Brunhild in graveyard, so before we try to go for the Artillerist, we want to be able to get as much cost modification as possible. So we're using things like Dark Alice and stuff like that to be able to discard it. Tyler's turn, we hit that Kaguya Stone of Sorrow. He has to pay 3 life if he wants to come in recovered. Also gets to peek at the top 2 cards of his deck, put him back on top in any order. It's not a full scry, it's not a full 4C, but it is still can be helpful to look at those top 2 cards. Tyler's sitting on a total of 3 will here, floats 1 green, and then uses Faerur's ability to recover a stone. No responses from me because I only have white will to go ahead and recover that stone, then immediately reuse it to play Trishula, getting him into another stone. So now still he spent 1 stone and 2 bodies got another stone, and decides to try to go in here for Magic Stone Research Institute. This is a little bit greedy, completely tapping himself out, walking right into that free number 13 thanks to Pandora. We say, look, you guys can have Eternal and Barrier or Eternal and Pierce, but it's going to be a while before you get there, because I'm not going to let you give your entire board +6/+6 off of an Institute. At that point in time, we're going to see a pass from Tyler. We're going to see a coined out Dark Alice Rabbit Princess, the wonderful new promo from the GPs this season, who gets us to draw into hopefully some more cost modification stuff. We already have the Brunhild that we can pitch. Hopefully seeing something else. We do see an Allosaurus, which is a little unfortunate since we already have one, so we'll go ahead and just pitch him and then draw for turn. Going ahead and going right in with that Artillerist of Faith. Currently our modified cost is +6 to light cards, which means that Allosaurus is currently a 15 drop that we just discarded, and so dealing a casual 3,000 damage to Tyler just off of the Artillerist. We do have a Keep the Faith in hand there, but we're going to go ahead and swing in for 4, swing in for 2, and if he's tapped out, it actually would be smart enough for us to go ahead and just use a Power of Immortality to just close out the game there. I think part of us was just thinking, well, I'll save the Power of Immortality in case he kills the Artillerist for some reason, but ultimately there is no point to that. Tyler's completely tapped out. It doesn't really make sense to give him a turn to win the game if we have the opportunity to just close it out. Ultimately, though, just passing the turn, we see a draw for turn for Tyler. And Tyler, knowing that he has nothing much to go off of there, we do also have the Keep the Faith in hand to be able to just go in. Does decide to tap out to play a Garion. We say, yeah, but that's fine. You couldn't do that. He swings in for 15, takes us down to 22, and at that point in time, he's just going to pass the turn, and we're going to swing in for lethal. Say, look, you've tapped out. You didn't even kill any of my bodies. You have no blockers. You're fully tapped out. Tyler just accepting his defeat. We're going to get to use the Praying Valkyrie to draw a card because that's not casting a spell. Gets us an additional 1 cost modifier, which means that Artillerist just gets to swing in for a bunch of damage, and we go into game 2. Going into game 2 here. Tyler choosing to take the play again. I think there's a point where he's saying, you know, the white coin's not a particularly big concern for him, and he's going to be able to ramp up more by having He's going to be able to ramp up more by having more stone calls, because he can use things like Spirit Color Elf and to make things like Sacred Elf and everything else like that. So his concern about the 1 white coin is pretty minimal. Calling that first stone, we see a Spirit Stone, which gets into Spirit Color Elf, generates him that token. He uses Spirit Color and the token to recover the stone, and then plays Sacred Elf. So automatically going into his second turn, he's got resources to be able to mess with me during my turn, but also going into his turn, he has a potential for 4 will, or even more. It'll be, 4 will during his turn 2. Can't stop Harvesting Season though, because it's a 2 cost that costs 1, so Garion can't hit it, and it's also not quick cast, so Faerur spell can't hit it, so we're gonna get to mill there. We did see the Einherjar's target of the Pandora, and we did get a +6 to our white cards off of that, which feels pretty good. I think we start to go for the Einherjar summon, but we don't actually have a number 13 in hand, so at this point in time I think we're actually just going to wait, because the idea is if we don't have a number 13, there's really no point in reanimating the Pandora and risking her getting killed. She will be able to come in when she's ready, once I'm ready to support her. Down comes that Trishula. We get a Magic Stone of Black Silence. deciding if he wants to try to go a little bit farther in. It would be safe for him to do so, to try to go for that art institute right now, but ultimately just chooses to swing in for 2 with the Sacred Elf. Says, I don't need 3 will during your turn. I'm going to hit you for 2 and have that 2 will up for my turn. After draw, but before recovery, we're going to see a coined out Dark Alice, just to be able to try to draw into something a little bit better. You see we pitch the final stance and another Praying Valkyrie, so our total cost is +7. If you're wondering where the final stance came from, it came from the sideboard. The idea is you also saw that Raise and Revive. The Raise and Revive can help reanimate and remove from game Brunhild at instant speed, which can then grab Final Stance and get us a second turn. So we essentially can pay 2 will at instant speed to be able to take an extra turn, which can be pretty silly. We don't main it. It is certainly something for the sideboard. A little bit risky against a green deck, but the thought was, you know what, let's try and see if we can pull it off in this game 2 of this feature match to show you how it works. Out comes that Pandora, and then we go ahead and pass the turn. Tyler making use of the fact that he gets to recover some stones before going ahead and going into Judgment of Faerur. So Faerur here is an 8/10 that enters with 4 counters that can give protections or buffs to elves, and then on enter is going to get to go search for a 4-drop or less elf and put it into play, usually grabbing 4-drop Faerur, a 10/10 that can help bring more elves to his hand to help with the swarming. This is a very, very good card. Gets a lot of value out of it. I mean, this man essentially just paid 2 will to put 1,800 damage on board in 2 bodies that also protect his board state and just kind of put him in a really good spot. Overall, very, very good. Seeing if he hits an elf off the top, something like Melfi would be really good to hit off the top here, because it would kind of keep the engine going a little bit more. Do see a Magic Stone Research Institute, so we know that that is coming, which is a little bit concerned, especially since this board is already pretty wide and we're already at 2 unique stones. Stonecall could get him a 3rd, Institute could get him a 4th, so very quickly this board could have Eternal thanks to Trishula, as well as Pierce thanks to Trishula, and the +8/+8 to everything. At the end of his turn, we're going to go ahead and try to do Keep the Faith to grab an Artillerist. Just say, okay, we don't have time, I don't think, to go for the final turn, so let's just go ahead and try to go for lethal. Tyler says, no, I actually do have answers to quick cast stuff, which is Faerur's spell, and then in comes the number 13 for free, which is why we reanimated the Pandora at this point to try to win the Cancel War. Tyler actually lets me win the Cancel War here, which I think is smart because the Artillerist is now on field, and he can use his other will to play Lorite. So this is helpful for him in the fact that, like, I've now at this point used up an Artillerist rather than getting it back to the grave for another Keep the Faith or something else like that. Before recovery, we start to go to for the idea of Dispel to kill the Trishula so his stuff can have Eternal, but ultimately go, wait a minute, we know your next card is Institute, so we're going to save the possible destruction of an addition until you try to cast that Institute. Go in with the Dark Alice. He says, fine, I'll take it. I don't mind taking 200 damage, which you go, that sucks. That's not what we wanted you to do. We wanted to try to have you block it so we could Power of Immortality. Ultimately, though, we're just going to go ahead and hard cast an Artillerist and get a little bit of damage in here to try to dig into something. Currently, the cost is being modified by +7. So by discarding this final stance, we're going to deal, here we got 12 cost, so we're going to deal 2,400 damage, taking Tyler down to 14. Now, there is a world here where we could use one of the runes to just push through for lethal here, since Tyler, again, has no will up at this point. Ultimately, though, again, we're trying to see if there's a way that we can get to the final stance or get to the Raise and Revive idea. And so we feel pretty comfortable about being able to deal with the Institute. And so we're just going to go ahead and pass the turn. Do I recommend doing this in terms of any kind of play? No, I think that should be obviously recommended that if you have the lethal line, you should push for it, especially if you feel like it's safe in this instance like Tyler is. But as they say, for the content, try to do something a little bit flashy. So currently this artillerist is going to be swinging in. My biggest thing on field is a 2-drop plus 7, which is a 9-drop. So artillerist is currently a 12/12. Tyler is going to use one of the counters on Faerur to give him +3/+3, which will make him an 11/13. And then just block. Weirdly enough, I could do Power of Immortality here, but the thing is, Power of Immortality wouldn't be helpful because I don't know why I moved the artillerist to the graveyard here, because he's a 12/12 and Faerur would have uneven stats. So it shouldn't have actually even killed my artillerist. That was a mistake on my part. Ultimately, just is that his Faerur survives and I lose a blocker to be able to potentially keep myself alive. If I had saved the artillerist, there's a very real opportunity for me to use Power of Immortality on his turn to keep my artillerist alive. And try to swing through for lethal damage that way. Calls the stone. Like you see, there's that 3rd stone there. See an Institute. In response to the enter effective Institute, we're going to try to use Dispel from the sideboard to shoot the Institute so that it will die before it can give his stuff protection. You see another Faerur spell come down there, holding on to 2 of them. Last card in hand looks to be a Shiva enters the Game of Gods. So currently everyone is getting +8/+8, which is more than enough to have Trishula give them all Barrier and Eternal. And I'm staring at a hand of double Lumia. Swinging in for that first strike at 800 or 900, goes ahead and does Shiva enters the Game of Gods to give his whole board +2/+2. So this is going to be hitting me for 11. We say, you know what, that's fine, we'll take it, which was actually a mistake. We should have tried to throw the Pandora under it. So that we had a better opportunity to be able to do some reanimation with the artillerist. Tyler playing this attack extremely properly, swings in for another 11 here with a Spirit Color Elf, and we block with the artillerist, which gets a counter, so he'll be a 13/13 now, which will just make them bounce off of each other because his Spirit Color Elf also has Eternal. And this was where we made a mistake. We miscalculated the fact that Faerur himself is currently sitting at being a 20/20, and with 3 counters from the Faerur can be 29/29. So we were thinking, oh, we'll take the damage from the Faerur, and then before the other 2 attack, we'll use Lumia to heal up. But Tyler did this combat sequencing exactly correct, got him myself within life point damage wise, so that Faerur by himself is lethal, and then is going to go ahead and pump him up. We're going to go ahead and at that point in time have to use Lumia to try to regain some life, so that we can then block with the Lumia. It'll pierce through. So he's swinging in for 28 or 29 off of the 3 pumps. We get a counter, so we get 6. We take 22 and go down to, or 600 from 29. So 23, we go down to 14. That math, I think, checks out. Block with the Pandora, who blocks the Sacred Elf, takes us down to exactly 1,000. And then Lorite, because of the pump, is exactly 100 more than he needs to for lethal. And so that'll be that, and we go to game 3. So a great example there of, if you have the line, take the line. We should have just closed out the game when we had the chance, rather than try to go for something a little bit flashier. We will have hopefully learned that lesson for game 3. Choosing to go on the draw again because we're trying to set up again to being able to put that pressure on by saying turn 1 harvesting season into Pandora, into Artillerist right out the gate, to be able to really put the pressure on Tyler before he can ramp up into something like Faerur and a wide board, before he can establish his so that establishing his Trishula and Academy Institute aren't worth his time. See that Ancient Magic Stone? We're going to go ahead and do the Mill 10 from Harvesting Season. There's 4 of the cards in double Brunhild, so automatically +4 to the cost of any white cards. Don't like seeing double Artillerist hit the grave there, but we did see a Pandora, which is helpful, and we're going to go ahead and just grab her right away. I believe we have a number 13 in hand, so we're just like, let's just do this now so that we can protect ourselves and, again, really apply that pressure. I imagine we see a coined out Artillerist come down here to throw the biggest card we have at his face just to deal damage. So current cost modification is +4 for a white card. We say, do you have any responses? He does have the right to stop it, but we have that number 13, like I said, to be able to make sure this gets through. Final stance goes to the graveyard. That is a 9-drop thanks to the Brunhilds, so it becomes +1800 damage to really put the pressure on. And at this point in time, our biggest thing on field is a 6-drop, so our Artillerist is already swinging in for 900 damage pierce, which is pretty great. Second Stone Call gets us a Magic Stone of Knowledge, and we go into a Spirit Caller Elf, so essentially turning a stone into a stone. So still has 3 will available during my turn to be able to interact. Lots of green spells, but ultimately, again, we're pretty safe because a lot of our stuff is instant speed, or is not instant speed, so Faerur spell is a little bit harder to have happen. Swinging in for 9 with the Artillerist, he says that's fine, I'll take it, go down to 13. Does have 2 Faerur spells in that hand. We say swing in for 4. No, that hand is triple Faerur spell. So really not looking great against a hand of non-quick cast things. So a very real opportunity for us to just kind of really close this game out. We're going to go ahead and pass turn here. I think the thought is if Tyler is going to try to commit to any kind of big play, it's going to make him pretty low on will, which means he won't be able to respond with things like the Faerur spells as consistently. But we do see a top deck dinner time, so what he can use here is produce 1 green, recover the stone, use the green for 3 green for dinner time, and then use those 3 to judgment Faerur. So even though we're like, hey, we're pretty safe here, he's going to have to use some will, Tyler top decking a card that says, oh, I'll just make more will, and still being able to go grab Faerur into Faerur while still leaving 3 will up for interaction. Clearly hoping something like a Melfi shows up at the top of his deck, because that would be pretty huge here for being able to draw it into something maybe a little bit more interactable, or at least another, maybe a Lorite would have been a great grab there to be able to protect himself. Ultimately, though, he is staring down a board of just pressure but no pierce, which is a problem, and we can do some pretty cool things here, paying 2 to try to do a keep the faith from hand, to say let's go ahead and try to bait out as many of these Faerur spells during your turn as possible. Down comes the first Faerur spell. Go to my turn. Before recovery, go ahead and go for that Power of Immortality, targeting the Artillerist. So again, this is the idea of we're trying to once again bait out as many of those Faerur spells as possible. Second Faerur spell comes down, and we say, okay, that's fine. We're even going to let that resolve because we do have that number 13 in hand there. And so the idea is at this point in time, we know for a fact he only has 1 card in hand. There's only 1 way that he can possibly interact with it, so we will always win that exchange. And we do have a way to get an Artillerist back to our hands pretty safely. This does leave us a little bit weak to Garion because of that 1 card in hand is Garion. That number 13 doesn't protect it, so it's a little bit of a risk, but ultimately one that we're willing to take. Tried to swing in for 9, say, hey, block this or not, and chooses to block with the Faerur, which is at 8-10, so they just bounce off each other, no damage goes through. Do get to see the 4th rune come out here or the 5th rune, make use of all 5 runes from the rune deck, a card called Soul Resonance. This is safe from Garion because it's a 2-drop that costs 1, lets us bring target Resonator from our graveyard back to the hand, and we can grab Artillerist of Faith, bring it back to the hand, and then not have to worry about anything Faerur spell wise. This leaves us, our only risk right now is Garion. Class the Artillerist of Faith to say, hey, does this resolve? I can pitch a 1-drop and kill you. The last card in hand is Faerur spell. It cannot stop us, so we can pitch the Angel, which will modify its own cost. Goes up to being a 3 plus another 5. It's an 8 cost for 1600 damage, and we throw that at his face for lethal. So that is the match. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys liked our new transitions. Thanks to Spyro from our Discord server for helping us with those, and for Tyler for sitting down with us for this match. Deck profiles for both lists will be up later this week. And until next time, this is GMO73 saying class dismissed.